Have you ever found yourself wondering if history follows um, predictable cycles? Cycles of power and decline, maybe quite apart from what we see just on the surface.
Or maybe if there are hidden forces truly at play, subtly shaping the world from behind the scenes.
Exactly. These are the kinds of profound questions, aren't they? Questions that have fascinated thinkers for centuries.
Yeah, this whole idea that what we perceive as reality might just be like the visible tip of a much larger, more complex system, unseen mechanisms driving events.
Precisely. So today we're doing a deep dive into exactly these questions. We've pulled together a really fascinating stack of sources. They explore the grand sweep of civilizations, this concept of so-called deep states, and the rich, often really surprising history of secret societies.
Our mission then is to unpack these ideas.
Yeah, extract the most important nuggets of knowledge and see what they tell us about who holds power, how it operates.
Or sometimes how it just spectacularly falls apart. Get ready for some genuine aha moments, I think.
Definitely. We're going to connect the dots between, ancient empires, these clandestine groups.
And even some of the modern day anxieties you hear about hidden influence.
Okay, let's start unpacking this. Let's begin with the grand cycles of power. Civilizations and empires, their rise, and maybe more importantly, their fall.
Right. And Arnold J. Toynbee, the 20th century historian, he had this really insightful theory about why civilizations break down.
His core idea, it revolved around a loss of creative power, didn't it?
Exactly. What Toynbee really highlighted was this shift. You have a creative minority that initially leads society forward, but then it degenerates into what he called a dominant minority.
Okay.
And this group then tries to retain by force a position which it has ceased to merit.
So it's not just a moral failing.
No, that's the key insight, I think. It's structural. When a society stops innovating, stops adapting, and instead just focuses on maintaining control through coercion.
It becomes brittle.
Inherently brittle, yeah.
Yeah.
Prone to collapse.
And we can see this play out historically. It's really compelling. Take the Greco-Roman example.
Okay.
Ancient Greek civilization was just incredibly advanced in thought, art, drama,
Yeah.
even early engineering.
Yeah, those impressive roads, water systems, the big stone buildings, public plazas.
Right. But then eventually Rome defeated Greece.
Forming what Toynbee labeled the unified civilization, the Roman Empire. He called this its universal state phase.
And a universal state in his framework is basically...
It's a period where one dominant power emerges after conflict, unifying huge territories. It often brings relative peace.
But maybe also a kind of stagnation.
Potentially, yes. And even though it was generally peaceful, Rome still had to contend with rebellious groups.
Both inside the empire and on the edges?
Exactly.
What I found really compelling in our sources was Toynbee's prediction. It felt almost prescient.
What was that?
He suggested the United States, basically since 1991, has been leading the whole planet into the first years of a Toynbee-style universal state.
Wow. And, just as he might have anticipated, the U.S. has faced its own challenges in this phase.
Right, dealing with smaller conflicts on the fringes of this global system, Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan.
And contending with what the source calls troublesome and rebellious small powers.
Like North Korea and Iran.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is presented as, well, the typical role of the great nation-state ruling this kind of phase, managing the edges of its influence.
But let's go beyond Toynbee's cycles for a moment. Why do empires actually crumble?
Good question. Looking at the Roman decline specifically, one source suggests it was their immense prosperity.
And lack of external enemies, maybe.
Leading to a comfortable life, an admiration of luxury.
Okay, so internal factors.
Yeah. This internal decay, as it's put, obliterated the enterprising spirit. And it eroded the patriotism and sense of honor of the Roman soldiers. The army itself just transformed.
So the insight here is that internal rot, a loss of purpose, adaptability, that can be just as destructive as an outside enemy.
Or maybe even more so.
That leads us right into this idea of extractive systems.
Ah, yes.
Our sources argue that nations rise and fall not just by military might, but by the very nature of their internal systems.
And extractive systems are those that basically concentrate power and wealth in the hands of a few.
Often by silencing dissent, exploiting the many.
And history gives us plenty of examples. Pharaoh's Egypt, right, enslaved the Israelites to build its wealth, seemed unshakable.
But it collapsed.
It did. And the analysis here from the sources is that by concentrating everything at the top, these systems become inherently brittle.
They lack a broad-based participation, Adaptability.
Exactly. They can't endure, they trigger their own downfall, sometimes regardless of external pressure.
And later, prophets even warned Israel's own leaders about this.
Telling them you trample on the poor, you deprive the poor of justice in the courts. That same pattern.
And then there's Babylon in Revelation 18, presented as the ultimate symbol of these systems.
An empire rich through greed and exploitation.
Destined for ruin. And its merchants weep, not for the people.
But for lost profit. It's quite stark.
So the big takeaway from these historical patterns seems to be
that systems built on concentrating power and wealth, often at the expense of justice, mercy, compassion, they sow the seeds of their own destruction.
they just lack the internal cohesion, the adaptability needed to last.
Right.
So what does all this mean for us right now? Are we living through one of these historical cycles ourselves?
And are the signs of decline? Or maybe the signs of new structures emerging? Are they visible today?
It definitely gives you something profound to think about.
It really does.
Okay, let's pivot now. Let's talk about that fascinating and often pretty controversial concept,
Yeah.
the deep state.
Ah, yes. This taps right into those anxieties about hidden influence.
How would we even define it?
Well, the term deep state generally refers to secretive power structures. Often they're described as military, intelligence, or bureaucratic networks that are believed to operate beyond the reach of democratic institutions.
Okay. And what's striking is that this isn't just a U.S. thing, is it?
Not at all. Similar ideas, concepts of behind-the-scenes control exist in many countries all over the world.
That's right. And the underlying fear itself, hidden networks, secret control, that's not new either.
Absolutely not. Worries about clandestine groups, unaccountable power, conspiracies undermining legitimate government, that's a thread woven throughout history.
But maybe intensified after World War II.
Well, the geopolitical restructuring after the war, plus the Cold War, definitely led to a big expansion of global intelligence and security networks.
Which naturally fueled perceptions of secret power structures.
It heightened fears, certainly. Fears of clandestine influence within governments, conceptually similar to our modern deep state idea.
Even things like the Bretton Woods system from 1944, setting up the global financial order.
Right. That fostered suspicion, too, of hidden financial influence, narratives about economic elites operating beyond democratic accountability.
Can we look at a concrete example? Like Propaganda Do P2 in Italy.
Oh, absolutely. That's a classic case study. It started as a seemingly normal Masonic lodge back in 1877.
But under its leader, Licio Gelli, it morphed into something else entirely.
Something quite sinister, yeah. It became subversive towards the Italian legal order.
And its significance lies in the fact that it was exposed, right?
Exactly. P2 was suspended in '76, later denounced by a parliamentary commission as a criminal organization, subversive.
That dissolves by law in 1982.
Yeah. And the investigation famously exposed these incredible connections between the mafia, the Vatican, and the renegade P2 Masonic Lodge.
Wow, so it shows how these hidden networks can really penetrate deep into society's fabric. Multiple powerful institutions.
Precisely. And these kinds of anxieties about deep states aren't just Italy or the U.S.
No, our sources mention similar fears emerging worldwide. Turkey, Europe, Latin America, the Middle East, Asia.
Specifically mentioning places like Venezuela, India, Indonesia, Morocco, Pakistan, Serbia, Spain, Thailand.
Even the city of London, the financial hub, gets mentioned in this context.
Which really underscores how widespread these suspicions are.
So, connecting this back to the U.S., the term deep state comes up a lot there.
It does. Frequently, it's been linked to high-profile figures, political discourse.
With some people stating it exists to battle people like Trump.
While others, including Trump himself, have vowed to destroy the deep state.
Or dismantle it with a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, referencing things like Schedule F, alleged purges at FBI DOJ.
Right. And it's important for us to just state that our sources present these as differing viewpoints within the public discourse. We're just reporting on that content.
Absolutely. So this raises a really thought-provoking question for you, listening.
Is the deep state a shadowy reality of actual clandestine control?
Or is it maybe just a label for, the inertia of big bureaucracies, established power structures that simply exist?
What stands out to you in these different examples we've talked about?
Okay, let's pull back the curtain a bit more. Let's delve into secret societies themselves, the actual players, maybe, behind the veil.
Why secrecy? Why is that so fundamental for these groups?
Well, they come in so many different forms, don't they? Magical, political, criminal, fraternal.
And their reasons for secrecy and often using disinformation are varied, but always strategic.
They use it to hide their plans, their goals,
Mm.
even their existence.
Or to cover up illegal activities, protect secret teachings, or just keep recognition signs and benefits exclusive to members.
And it's a two-way street, isn't it? The disinformation.
Oh, absolutely. Our sources point out that enemies of secret societies, governments, religious hierarchies, rival groups, they also use disinformation strategically.
Which means
It means, as one source warns, that much of what passes for knowledge about secret societies nowadays consists of deliberately circulated disinformation.
so separating fact from fiction is a real challenge here.
A genuine challenge. Political and revolutionary secret societies give us some really compelling examples of the strategic secrecy.
Like the Carbonari in Italy, early 19th century.
Exactly. They had remarkable success organizing political pressure, even revolutionary violence, across Europe.
And their keys to success were pretty clever.
Very clever. First, they used popular religious symbolism, not obscure stuff. That made them way more acceptable in Catholic and Orthodox countries.
Smart.
Second, they deliberately recruited from the middle classes, government workers, junior army officers.
People who wanted constitutional government.
Right. And this program of infiltration made them incredibly hard to suppress. Why?
Because the police and soldiers sent to hunt them were often members themselves.
Exactly. And their roots, interestingly, trace back to French La Charbonnerie.
We see similar patterns elsewhere too, right? The Decembrists in Russia, 1825.
Yeah, a direct product of secret societies, officers leading 3,000 soldiers into St. Petersburg, hoping to spark an army uprising.
It failed ultimately, but it shows the ambition.
Definitely. And then think about early America. The committees of correspondence, the Sons of Liberty.
During the Revolution.
The committees in New York and Boston were important in founding the Sons of Liberty. One source even calls them terrorist.
Which highlights how perceptions change depending on who's telling the story, right?
Absolutely. You had members like Samuel Adams, Paul Revere leading key actions, and those committees eventually got absorbed into colonial legislatures.
Leading to the Continental Congress.
Right. Then fast forward to the U.S. Civil War, another fascinating example. The Knights of the Golden Circle, or OEG.
Supporters of Southern independence?
Staunch supporters, they spread into the Midwest, opposed Union enlistment, the draft, helped Confederate spies, smuggled goods.
Organized politically against Lincoln. Even had a presence way out in California, surprisingly.
Yeah, and while OAK stopped after 1865, its legacy is traced, unsettlingly, to early KKK recruitment.
Wow. Okay, but not all secret societies are political or revolutionary.
Yeah.
Many are fraternal, benevolent.
Right, focused on mutual aid, community, like compagnonnage in France, which emerged for journeyman craftsmen when the old guild system broke down.
Providing support for travelers.
Exactly. And then Odd Fellowship. In Britain and America, it grew to become the largest fraternal secret society in the world by 1880.
Even attracted members during the anti-Masonic backlash. Experienced huge growth in the American West.
And notably, there was also the Grand United Order of Odd Fellows for African Americans, chartered from London in 1843.
After white Odd Fellows rejected their petition based on race.
Yeah, shows the complexities even within fraternal orders.
Okay, now let's explore some of the more occult, mystical, historically intertwined societies. Freemasonry is probably the big one everyone knows.
Right. And interestingly, some women were admitted historically, like Elizabeth Aldworth in the 18th century.
And there was even adoptive masonry, founded specifically for women in France in 1760.
What's really intriguing about Freemasonry is its deep use of allegory, like the Hiram Abiff legend.
What does that represent?
Well, it has multiple meanings depending on the group. Faithfulness facing death, maybe the execution of King Charles III, suffering under overlords, even the fall of spirit into matter or ancient events. It's layered.
And then there's the Scottish Rite, founded 1802, Charleston, South Carolina, expanded to 33 degrees.
And its connections to the Kabbalah, the mystical tradition, are quite explicit. Those degrees aren't just ranks. They're a symbolic journey through esoteric concepts, rooted in earlier Jacobite masonry.
Sacred geometry, too. That was a big part of Renaissance occultism that got fused into Masonic lore.
Absolutely. Practices based on it, like using the pentagram, are still significant in occult secret societies today.
But despite its reach, Freemasonry has faced a lot of criticism.
Oh, constant criticism and persecution for centuries. The Catholic Church condemned it back in 1738, outlawed by Nazis, communists.
And a favorite target of conspiracy theorists, as one source puts it.
Definitely. Including claims of Masonic devil worship stemming from that Palladian order hoax in the 1880s.
Which actually popularized the word Satanist.
Ironically, yes. And material from that hoax is still quoted as fact by some prominent figures today.
Even the phrase lodge goat.
That started in anti-Masonic writings, but Masons quickly adopted it themselves, turned it into kind of an insider joke.
Okay, moving to some other influential groups. The Assassins. They emerged from the Ismaili sect of Islam, late 11th century.
Right, and the figure of Hermes Trismegistus is huge in Hermeticism,
The Greek god Hermes mixed with the Egyptian god Thoth, thrice great.
leading to all these astrological, alchemical, mystical writings attributed to him. They even influenced early Christian thinkers like Augustine.
Then you have the Elect Koans, an 18th century French magical order.
Founded by Pasquale, developed a system called Le Chose, the Thing, secret rituals to conjure spirits, achieve reintegration.
A mystical return to unity, marked by weird lights and sounds.
Yeah, passes, they called them. The order dissolved, but its teaching spread widely in European occult circles.
Even Giordano Bruno, burned at the stake in 1600. He had a surprising impact later on.
He did. His version of the art of memory influenced early Scottish Freemasons. His pantheism inspired 18th century radicals.
And Wicca, too. Not just invented out of whole cloth.
No, its founder, Gardner, drew heavily from his own participation in various occult secret societies.
So Wiccan initiation rituals share similarities with.
Co-Masonry, that branch of Freemasonry admitting women, and the Rosicrucian Order of the Crotona Fellowship. Also connections to English woodcraft, a youth movement with ceremonies referencing an earth goddess and a horned god.
Fascinating links. And finally, the Temple of Set.
A Satanist magical order founded 1975, split from the Church of Satan. They distinguish between nature-worshipping religions, most traditions, and their own consciousness-worshipping approach.
Core values being intellectual clarity, self-discipline, personal autonomy.
Right. Members are even encouraged to question conventional morality. The goal is attainment of godhood.
Defined as
Eternal, isolated self-consciousness outside of nature and the universe. Pretty intense stuff.
this whole fascinating journey through secret societies leads us naturally into the, well, often wild world of alternative history and conspiracy culture.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Take pre-Columbus voyages. While evidence supports Irish and ancient Scottish trips via the northern route,
Other claims, like Knights Templar having overseas empires, or Egyptians teaching the Mayans.
those rely on wild assumptions, not evidence, as the source puts it.
The Great Pyramid, too. It attracts all sorts of theories.
Oh, it's a magnet. Charles Piazzi Smith's pyramidology claimed the passages predicted the future, found hidden math constants.
Though critics called it pyramidiacy.
Rightly so, many would argue. Similarly, speculations about Mary Magdalene being Jesus' wife. They lack definite evidence.
And claims the Catholic Church suppressed evidence, like the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Those were disproven, turned out to be more about academic politics rather than anything more sinister.
But the insight is that this kind of rejected knowledge, even when debunked,
It tends to get recycled in the rejected knowledge scene over and over again.
and the rise of this rejected knowledge from the fringe to the mainstream includes some really imaginative stuff.
Like vast underground alien bases, Bigfoot living in hidden underground refuges.
U.S. government bases blown up into vast labyrinths of subterranean cities for the black helicopters of the New World Order.
Some theories even fuse these with the hollow earth idea. It gets pretty wild.
What about reptilians?
Clear parallels with old pulp science fiction lizard men. There's even this historical oddity, the Hefferlin manuscript from 1940s occult circles.
Claiming what?
Claiming evil reptile men from Venus battled benevolent humanoid Martians over Rainbow City under the Antarctic ice, a blend of sci-fi and Lovecraft.
Wow. And the historical movements get exploited too, like the Vem.
Yeah, a medieval German secret justice system. Its reputation was later exploited by the Nazis and more recent extremists to give their own nasty aims a false sense of historical backing.
And when we look at contemporary groups operating in secret,
We find chilling examples. The White Order of Thule, an international neo-Nazi secret society from 1994.
or Christian Identity,
Yeah.
a radical Protestant movement advocating for Christian dictatorship, slavery, death penalty for various offenses.
With clear overlaps with neo-Nazis and the KKK, these groups exist now.
And finally, global conspiracies. Bilderberg meetings, the Trilateral Commission.
They've been given a large role in American conspiracy theories at both ends of the political spectrum.
Groups like the John Birch Society, seeing them as plots for a global dictatorship.
While some on the far left see them as aiming for a corporate world order, they still feature heavily in New World Order theories.
It's so crucial, though, as our sources stress, to remember that origin stories are not the same thing as historical evidence.
Absolutely. The Scottish Rite claiming Crusades' origins versus its actual 18th century French invention. The narrative might be compelling.
But the evidence often tells a different, more nuanced story.
Exactly.
We've really explored a wild array of groups and concepts today, from ancient empires to modern anxieties, players behind the veil. As you reflect on all this, what kind of secret society might you be most drawn to, or maybe most concerned by, and why?
It's quite a journey we've taken. Through the grand cycles of civilizations, examining that enduring concept of the deep state, exploring the fascinating, often contradictory world of secret societies.
From ancient myths to very modern anxieties, it seems the human fascination with hidden power, with influence, it just remains constant.
And what we've learned today really underscores that while some fears are definitely rooted in verifiable history, in genuine hidden influences.
Others are fueled by elaborate hoaxes, deliberate disinformation.
Or maybe just a lack of understanding about how power, both the visible kind and the invisible kind, truly functions.
So as you reflect on these patterns, the rise and fall, the whispers of hidden power, the different reasons for secrecy, consider this final thought.
How might understanding these historical currents, these narratives, empower you to critically assess the stories and claims you encounter in today's very complex world?